Doesn't it feel like we're living through a storm of history? Unpredictable, chaotic, just one crisis right after another. It's a feeling that's become way too common. So let's dive into a theory that offers a map for this storm, one that's landed on the desks of top strategists and investors who are all trying to make sense of this.
Yeah, for most of us, history just seems like a totally random series of events. A jumble of names, dates, and, well, directionless chaos. It's a pretty modern way of looking at it, really. We've kind of devalued the lessons history can teach us. Some academics even say there is no single story, just a grab bag of old details. The past becomes irrelevant, It's just history.
But what if that's all wrong? What if, underneath all the noise and the chaos, history isn't random at all? What if it actually moves in a predictable, repeating cycle, a rhythm that we can understand and maybe even anticipate?
And that brings us to the core idea behind the fourth turning theory from historians William Strauss and Neil Howe. They suggest that history has seasons, just like a year, and this whole cycle, all 4 seasons, has a name that goes way back to the ancient world.
It's called a saeculum. The ancient Etruscans used this word to describe the length of a long human life, which is about 80 to 100 years. They saw it as this natural century, the central unit of their history and their destiny. And for Strauss and Howe, it's the fundamental building block of modern history too.
So here's the crucial part. Each saeculum is broken down into 4 distinct phases, or turnings. These are basically the seasons of a society. It all starts with a high. That's the confident spring of growth. That then gives way to an awakening, a fiery summer of cultural rebellion. Then comes the unraveling, a kind of autumn where institutions get weaker and society starts to fragment, and it all leads to the crisis, a harsh winter of destruction that, and this is key, clears the ground for a brand new beginning.
So after a huge crisis, society enters a yawning. Think about the post-World War II era in America. There was this collective sense of purpose, right? Institutions were trusted, and being an individual took a back seat to being part of the community. It was a time of building and, a lot of conformity.
But the kids born during that high, they grow up and start to challenge that whole order. The awakening is like a spiritual and cultural firestorm. Think of the consciousness revolution of the 1960s and 70s. The focus flips from the group to the self, from conforming to being authentic.
And that leads directly to the unraveling. Trust in institutions just crumbles, cynicism is everywhere, and a culture of intense individualism takes over. Society feels fragmented, divided. The 1990s and early 2000s are a perfect example, an era of culture wars, political gridlock, and just this feeling that the center couldn't hold. And then, autumn gives way to winter. The crisis. This is a decisive, world-changing era where the very survival of society is on the line. The old order is destroyed, and in the face of some massive threat, war, revolution, collapse, a new one is forged in fire.
So, what's the engine driving this powerful, repeating cycle of seasons? Well, according to the theory, it's not random events. It's something much more fundamental, the constant, predictable rhythm of human generations, each with its own unique personality.
Okay, this slide right here is the key. It reveals the engine of the whole cycle. 4 generational archetypes. First up, you've got the prophets. Born after a crisis, they grow up in stable times and become these visionary, moralistic leaders who challenge the old order and kick off an awakening. Then come the nomads, who grow up as alienated kids during that chaotic awakening. They become pragmatic survivalists, ready to lead when the next crisis hits. They raise the heroes, a protected team player generation that's called upon to build and win during that crisis. And finally, the artists are born right in the middle of a crisis. They become sensitive, maybe overprotected souls who work to bring fairness and harmony to the new world that emerges. You can see how the cycle feeds itself, right? History shapes the generations, and then those generations go on to create history.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds a little abstract, but the theory is actually grounded in a ton of historical evidence. When you look back, this pattern of a fourth turning crisis, that societal winter, repeats with, honestly, startling regularity.
And this just illustrates the rhythm perfectly. Look at the timeline. Roughly every 80 to 90 years, the length of one saeculum, a huge society-redefining crisis happens. From the colonial era to the Revolution to the Civil War, and then to the Great Depression and World War II. Each one was a period of extreme danger that ended one world and started a completely new one.
So this brings us to the big critical question. If this cycle is real, where are we right now? And this is where the theory gets really personal and really urgent.
Okay, check this out. This is probably the most startling part of the whole thing. Writing way back in the 1990s, during an Unraveling, Strauss and Howe used their model to make a prediction. They forecasted America's next great crisis, the next fourth turning, would kick off around 2005 and hit its climax by the mid-2020s.
Does that timeline sound at all familiar? Just think about the major events of the last 2 decades. The 2008 financial crash, the insane political polarization, new geopolitical conflicts, a global pandemic, widespread social protests, the dizzying speed of tech disruption. A lot of analysts look at this and don't see separate problems but interconnected symptoms of our current fourth turning.
So if we are in a societal winter, it's totally natural to feel anxious. These are dangerous times for sure, but the theory also has this really powerful message of hope. A crisis isn't just an end, it's also a beginning.
See, a fourth turning always has 2 faces. There's immense danger, war, collapse, depression, you name it. But there's also immense opportunity. These are the periods that clear away broken institutions and force us to renew our sense of community. They allow for new economies and new social contracts to be built. Historically, the great sacrifices made during a crisis have always led to a new era of stability and growth, a brand new high.
But here's the catch. The outcome is never guaranteed. As the authors themselves wrote, these moments can lead to glory or to ruin. This cycle tells us what season we're in, but it doesn't write the ending for us. Our choices matter now more than ever.
So, as we navigate this societal winter, the theory leaves us with a really profound and, I think, empowering question. The old world is breaking down, no doubt about it, but a new one is waiting to be built. The only question left is, what will we, the people living through this moment, choose to build next?